Chapter 375 has finally been released. Now, although we have been patiently waiting for this to release, it was definitely a very pleasant surprise to notice that this month's chapter started off with great news. There is a total of 20 pages for this given chapter of well-drawn panels too. Now, what really matters though at the end of the day is what was revealed in this new chapter, so let's dive right into it. The chapter starts off with a re-emergence of a few old familiar characters, Daiba and Silat. Now, if some of you may have forgotten, these two characters have had an interesting alliance of sorts with Rickard, who was a prominent figure that came back after 11 years of not seeing him in our real-life timeline. To recap, we last saw Rickard, Silat, and Daiba gang together against the Rakshas, an immensely powerful apostle that tried to murder Rickard after Rickard slapped the shit out of Griffith. And what occurred following that was a fight that placed Rickard, Silat, and Daiba against Rakshas, and subsequently winning against him. This was quite a feat, as this was one of the only times we have seen normal humans win against an apostle outside of our freak of nature guts, which basically solidified my acknowledgement of their strength, and how I instantly recognized that they may be crucial to the story of Berserk after that given moment. Nevertheless, we see Daiba and Silat start off the chapter discussing Daiba's fortune telling about a chained beast who will come covered with a hazy white fog, obviously referring to Guts. And this is interesting because it basically determines that everything that has happened throughout the course of the last few chapters have all been part of a predetermined plan, hence demonstrating that Guts' struggle with Griffith wasn't one that was bred from Griffith's chaotic, unwelcome desire for power, but still within the grasp of the grand plan of reality. This is refreshing to reflect on, as it gives a sense of hope that Guts' struggle isn't for vain. There is a resounding purpose behind it, and not just another rape from Griffith's selfish wants. Now, as we continue these pages, we notice that once we transition into the scene onto the ship, the story takes a turn as we are provided with confirmation on what has actually unfolded in regards to Guts. We notice that our prediction that Guts has in fact transformed into an enraged monster was incorrect. In fact, it is so far removed from that statement. Guts is revealed to be a pathetically depicted, broken man that has seemingly completely given up on everything, and this comes to the shock of literally everyone. It even seems to be shocking to the ones that have him changed. Now, what is interesting in this instance is that everyone who relied on him from his party seems to have had their entire worldviews completely shattered to the point of desperation and despair, especially with Isidro, who has always valued him as his goal, as his hero. This speaks volumes about Guts' masculinity and humanity. As tough as Guts has been portrayed as, we always seem to immediately jump to the conclusion that Guts will rip anything apart that is in his way, through his sheer will, courage, strength, and stoicism. But this makes us place him on a pedestal, makes us want to see him as this immovable object that is always reliable, unchanging, and unfazed. But there is no fucking human on the planet that is like that. Which brings me back to why I think it is such a genius move to see Guts so broken, pathetic, and useless. This has actually deeply struck the hearts of many fans as well, who firmly state that Moira would have never done this if he was still alive. But those who have read and reread Berserk time and time again know that even that isn't particularly true. Guts has been the subject countless stages and trials of struggle and suffering in order for him to become all reliable. We just tend to forget since we have come so far. It is always easy to forget the painful past when the present is so secured, and this statement not only applies to our lives, but it also applies to the fact that Guts has been pretty pathetic and useless several times throughout the manga too. There was the instance when he gave up his entire self to serve Griffith, only for Griffith to end up controlling him and using him as an assassination tool. When he discarded Casca aside to wallow in his pity when he should have placed her first and used that anguish as some sort of motivating fuel. When he nearly raped Casca after nearly giving into his beast of darkness where his feral desires overwhelmed his moral senses. All of these are prime examples that he is not a perfect one-dimensional cliche hero that we see in so many other stories. No, he is a flawed human being like every one of us too. However, this is still extremely difficult to swallow, especially if your very own livelihood depends on a person like Guts. And we witness this in this chapter, when we see a bunch of characters display the pathetic expressions of despair, disappointment, that their ultimate trump card, guts is no longer something they can hide behind in comfort, and that they have to take full accountability for their circumstances. And like Isuru though, it becomes blatantly apparent that placing someone else so high up in your hopes and dreams only ends in soul-crushing disappointment, which doesn't really reflect the person you admire, but in fact deeply reflects your lack of personal accountability and discipline. Isidro has always boasted to want to be as strong as Guts, but has not improved at fucking all, but is all talk and no action. To the point where I'm sure many of us viewers just see him as some pathetic comedic relief that adds zero value to the story of Berserk, and I'm hoping that this chapter has changed that. Upon seeing Guts in such a frail, weakened state, I am hoping that we see something, anything, even if it is a fragment in Isidro's character development, because I'm sick and tired of seeing some whiny kid talking big about someone that actually does what he says and says what he does. Other than that, we were given so many pages and insights on the characters, and coupled with some great spreads in regards to the artwork, it seems exciting to see what will happen in the next one. I mean, it does end on some form of cliffhanger, seeing as they are slowly drifting into another city or something. So maybe another setting, another fresh perspective? Who knows? I guess we will find out when we find out, and hopefully sooner than later. For now, keep struggling, my friends, and I love you all.